Good morning. There we go. So that way we don't forget. So there's a new Zoom made a change over the weekend where now they have to tell everybody who comes in if there's recording on, and it has to be announced. So
Really?
yeah, isn't that crazy?
It tells you now. Yeah, it does. And it makes you have to say okay. Like it won't just let it go away.
Interesting.
All right, we'll have a fun Ignite, and I'll see you on the Zooms today.
Hi, Brooke.
Bye, guys.
Okay. So good morning to everybody who's on so far. Got a few more minutes and we'll get started. Sam, how are you today?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. We're gonna have fun today. This is actually one of my favorite. I love this one. I love this session.
Negotiating the deal, that is one of my favorites.
I love it.
Yeah. Because if you're negotiating a deal, that means you have a deal to negotiate, right? A transaction, which is always really good.
It's always awesome.
Yeah.
Which is always awesome. The first time it might be a little scary, but we're going to take all the scary right away from it and break it down today.
Rhonda, do you remember the first time you had to negotiate your first transaction?
Yes, I was absolutely terrified. I was absolutely terrified.
And how did it work out for you?
It actually, it worked out. It did work out well. And I think I probably, the first one I negotiated, I asked for a little help from my broker at the time. Yet, I think I learned really, like the very first thing I learned was that as the person doing the negotiating, as the realtor that was driving the negotiation, that my tone set the tone of the negotiation. And I think that was what I learned. That was my very first lesson. And it was something that stuck with me.
Love that. Yeah. Because that really, that's something that I talk about a lot, is like keeping the emotion out of your negotiating. Because your clients are emotional enough for all of it, right? So as long as you stay logical and keep the emotion out of it and keep that professional tone, you're good. You're good.
Yep.
As soon as the agent puts the emotion into it, that's when you start getting that kind of muddy water and it gets a little sticky.
It's so true, Jen. I couldn't agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, as realtors, we are our role is to be, I'm just looking to clean my glasses because they're really gross. We should be the calm in the storm and let everybody else be emotional, but we should be the rock that just kind of keeps everything together and keeps everything moving in the right direction.
So Jen, speaking of emotional clients, my first deal I ever brought in myself, It was the second deal I ever worked on. My first one came from my team leader. First deal I brought in myself, the client about 10 days before closing said that she was going to burn down the house. So we had to keep everything together. The house was fine. We got to the closing, everybody was happy, but shows how we have to always stay level when other people might not be.
That is one of the extremes I've heard, right? So that's how emotional she got over it, right? That she, yeah, wow. Well, that's a great example of staying professional, staying calm and logical. Anyone else have a first time negotiating story they want to share? Rhonda and Sam, our instructors today, were just sharing their first two as everybody's popping on. Put your cameras on too if you're able to. Love to see your beautiful faces. Good morning, Pam.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Julie, nice to see you. Adrian, Chuck, I appreciate you guys putting your cameras on for us.
Morning.
Good morning.
It's a beautiful day. It's so nice out again today.
Here in Rhode Island, it is beautiful. How is it everywhere else in New England? Good. We got thumbs
That's
up.
awesome. We're up in Maine. It's gonna be like 72 and sunny today.
Oh,
Right
that's
now.
perfect.
Yeah.
That's like the perfect temperature, I think. 72 and sunny. That's perfect. Give me that all year and I'm good.
I agree.
I just came from Florida and it was hot. It was hot. Especially walking around Disney in the sun. It's hot.
Oh my God. What was the favorite? What was Evie's favorite in Disney? Did she have?
Well,
were
she was
you
able to
do it?
see Anna, so that was huge.
Okay.
So, but she did sleep through the Frozen ride, which was not a great thing. I think that was the whole reason we went to Epcot. It's okay. All right. She's 2, so it's okay. We'll go back.
You took video. You took video to prove you were there.
Yeah. All right, Rhonda, it's 9:04. Let's kick this party off and get started and going right into negotiating. Negotiate the deal today, guys. That's the session we're on. We're in element 7. All the material, I'll copy this, what Brooke just put in here and post it again for those of you who were not on a few minutes ago. Let me get that in here.
Yes, welcome everybody. Super excited. I know this is one of my favorite Ignite sessions to teach. It is one of the most fundamental things that we are going to do as real estate agents is be able to negotiate. And you negotiate, it's not just when you put a contract together. We negotiate in our lives every single day, right? I mean, there's many times just in our personal lives that we're always negotiating something, right? Who's bought a car, right? You have to negotiate. I don't know. I negotiate on a daily basis with my husband all the time. I do win most of those negotiations. I will just say that. But right, we're always negotiating, and as realtors and in real estate, you're negotiating your commission when you're sitting down to sign a listing agreement. Sometimes you have to negotiate your commission. You're going to negotiate when you put a deal together and you're talking to. If you're representing a buyer and you're talking to a listing agent about presenting an offer to them, there's negotiations that go in regardless of who you're representing. There's going to be negotiation when you start talking about repairs and repair addendums. And then you sometimes, again, have to renegotiate if an appraisal comes back, which is something that we're dealing with in this current market. So there's a lot of points in the process of real estate that you may have to negotiate, and tightening up your skills and honing in on your skills is something that is super, super important to do. So what you guys we're going to learn today. So welcome everybody. I'm so excited to see you. Sam and I are teaching today. Sam, do you want to say anything before we kick off?
Yeah, just to introduce myself, I'm one of the productivity coaches for KW Coastal in Rhode Island. I first started with KW, came back to KW close to a year ago at this point to help lead our coaching program, and just really excited to be able to help you guys out today, and be able to teach some people and learn from people that are not just in my market center. And that's one of the things I really love about Keller Williams overall.
Awesome. So excited to be doing this with you today, Sam. So
So Rhonda, do you want me to share my screen so everyone can see the PowerPoint, or are we bringing it
yeah,
up on our own pages?
absolutely, no, go for it.
Okay. All right, can everyone see that?
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So what are we going to do today? So in this session today, we are going to break down and apply the tactics and tackle the common points of negotiation. We're going to we're going to talk about the strategy, the 3 Ps: prepare, present, and position, that employ the strategies of practical application. Anytime that you can take even other classes or anything on negotiation, definitely do it. I took a class a couple of years ago. It was through RIAR. It was actually a certification class that is called Negotiate. I think it was a certificate of negotiation or negotiation expert. It had a little trending name to it. And one of the things that I learned in that class was, what type of negotiator are you? And there are different types of. Everybody has a negotiating style, and the one thing that I've always taken away from it, and that I always try to be, is I always try to be very collaborative in my negotiating style. And we're going to talk about that today. And we were just talking briefly before a few of you jumped on about whoever is setting the tone. As if you are setting the tone for the negotiation, regardless of who you're talking to, that tone is going to that's going to set the tone of how that negotiation is going to go. And to be able to come at it and be able to present at a very level, with a very level mind, and a very just presenting the facts and presenting the points and being open to the other side and give and take, that is how you want to, in my opinion, that is how you want to approach things. So if you go in calmly, the negotiation process is going to be calm. And you always want to be open to listen to the other side. And the other really good point that I took away from that class was, and this was something when I first started, that I always wanted the negotiation stuff. I just wanted it over with. Like, I'm just going to go in, I want to get it done, because it was uncomfortable at first and you're not used to it. And the one thing I learned was, sometimes let it take a little. It's okay if it takes a couple of days, or it's okay. Give people time to kind of think. And, we're representing our client's best interest. And sometimes they might need overnight to think about something, and that is okay. So don't feel like you have to rush through it. Just let it happen. And as long as we're always working towards common ground, negotiation it's just a conversation. It's a conversation to bring 2 sides together and find some common ground between them.
One thing I want to add quickly is I have a current deal that I'm negotiating right now. It's had been negotiated for 2 weeks already. So it's not all going to happen immediately, like Rhonda said. And the urgency, we just want to be aware that it's not always there. Sometimes it certainly is, but it is okay if people sleep on things, or if now's not the right time, and maybe in a couple of weeks, plans could change as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Sam, do you want to move to the next slide?
Yep.
Okay, so this is everything that you've been focusing on at Ignite so far. And, we have the side of growing your business. There's activities for growing, activities for running your business. Negotiating contracts falls under run your business. So that's where we are right there. Okay, we can go to the next one. So here's our roadmap for today that I already mentioned. We're going to break down the common points of negotiation, examine the 3 Ps approach to negotiation, and analyze some counter tactics. If we have some time, we'll do some real play. We'll see if we have time for that. And then we're going to recap, create your success list, and talk about our daily success. Before we jump in, does anybody have any questions? Is anybody negotiating something right now where you're kind of stuck, or where something's going on that you want to just throw out there quickly? Okay, all right, Sam, next slide.
And I would add, as Rhonda is speaking about things, if you have any questions, you can always just throw them in the chat, and I'll make sure to monitor that as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Sam. Perfect. Okay, so let's consider, how can your ability to negotiate affect the outcome of the deal? So somebody answer that question. How can your ability to negotiate affect the outcome of the deal?
I think if you're like nice to work with, I think it could have a good outcome. You know, if you're stern and not ability to like, accommodate the other side, I think you can turn them off to that, and it might, break the deal because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. I mean, sometimes if if you as the agent, I mean, in most situations, you are going to be representing either your buyer or your seller. You're going to be negotiating with another agent who's then going to be talking to their represented party. So on the graphic there on the left kind of shows, right? You have the seller and the buyer, and then the agents in between. And so most times where those two red arrows are, you're negotiating with the other agent, who's then going to bring that back to his seller and then talk to their seller if you're representing the buyer, or vice versa. And if you and the other agent if there's a lot of friction between you in your negotiation styles, sometimes that could have adverse effects on the deal as a whole. So, you want to make sure that, you're leaving your ego out of it, and that you're just coming in there and you're just presenting the information, representing your client, of course, but yet also being collaborative in your approach. And so we were talking about that there are ways that you negotiate in everyday life, which, we throw out a couple examples of that. So what do you feel are skills that great negotiators possess? What are some skills that you think, like just knock it out of the park for a negotiator?
Well, you have to be a good listener.
Oh, I love that, Pam. Absolutely. You have to be a very good listener. Yes. Anyone
good
else?
communicator.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. One more.
Patient.
Yes.
Be
Awesome.
patient.
Yes, you have to be very, very patient.
I would add a
Absolutely.
problem solver.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely. There's many times where you're going to be negotiating, and, both sides are going to draw a line in the sand, and they're going to still be a little part away. And if you can be a problem solver and still figure out how to bring everybody a little bit closer. So sometimes you need to kind of think on your feet, and you need to kind of be able to come up with a solution that everybody can live with and move forward. Because sometimes the emotion of it all, our buyers and our sellers are emotional. And sometimes when those emotions rise, they can't see anything further. And then sometimes it's just out of pride that they are, they're just not going to give another inch at all in that transaction. And it's up to us to really to kind of dive in with them, and sometimes remind them that I know that you're upset, and I know that you're kind of feeling like you're at your limit, yet let's look at the big picture, right? Is that $5,000 that we're apart, is that really worth walking away from this home for? Over the course of the next 10 years that you may live in this house. So sometimes you have to ask big picture questions to just get them past that point and that emotion that they're feeling. Which leads us to the last question here. Why is asking questions important?
Trying to find someone's motives is like what they're trying to get out of the deal.
Exactly. Asking questions is going to reveal what their true motivation is and what they really want. And sometimes you have to go back to basics with them when you're kind of at that breaking point, and find out what's really important to them. So that way you can help them.
I do
Anybody
want
else?
to add one more, Rhonda.
Yeah,
You
please.
touched on relationships, and I think relationship building is a big skill in negotiating, because it's the negotiating that happens before the actual contracts. So, especially a market like right now, if you have strong relationships with other agents, you are going to have a leg up on the other offers, an equal offer, or maybe an offer that's a little bit more appealing than your client's offer, just because the agent on the other side knows that that you run a really smooth deal, that the two of you have very strong communication with one another. Maybe they've worked with you in the past, or if they haven't worked with you in the past, at least you've had some sort of conversations, just being able to introduce yourself and show that you're friendly and professional. So I know there's been many times I have won offers for my buyers because of the relationships I've had with the listing agent, even if they're not in my office. And then vice versa. I've had listings that multiple bidding situations, and their offer has been as low as 15,000 below the highest offer. And then rather than trying to just go with that highest offer, we asked the one that we had the relationship with to match the highest one. And they did it, they won the deal, and we had a really smooth transaction because of it. So the actual relationship building is obviously, as we all know, just about the most important thing in real estate, but that goes for other agents as well, because that's going to help you negotiate without actually having to concede on different things. It's just going to help you and your clients have a leg up down the road.
I love that point, Sam. Such a good point. Okay, does anybody have anything to add before we move on? All right, let's do it, Sam. Okay, I think we can,
Do you want to move past this one?
yeah, I think we'll move past that. I just want to make sure that we get through all of our stuff. We can always go back to that. So common points of negotiation, right? I mean, these are right. You're going to go negotiate on price. You're going to negotiate on terms. It's not always going to be about the price. Sometimes, you may have in this market, right? You might have, 10 offers, 8 offers on a property, and they may all be very similar in price. And so sometimes it's going to come down to terms. So as you're writing offers with your buyers and you're going to prepare to negotiate that offer, you have to think about everything that's going to go into that offer and all the ingredients that are going to make up that offer. It's the price, it's how quickly they're going to close, it's whether they're cash or they're going to do a mortgage, it's whether they're going to have inspections or not have inspections. It's about other contingencies that maybe they're placing on the home. Sometimes there's other contingencies that get built into those other provisions. So all of those things are going to make up that full offer. And when that offer is being presented to the seller, if you're presenting that offer or if you're giving it as the buyer's agent, the seller's going to make a decision based on all of those things. And all of that starts coming into play in the negotiation process. This is also why it's really, really important to ask questions. So if we're representing the buyer and you're going in and looking at the home, ask questions of the listing agent. Why are your sellers selling? Where are they going? How quickly do they want to get there? Do they have another place to go right now? Sometimes if you even find out from there that, they're looking for a rental right now and they're not sure, maybe in your offer, if you say, we're willing to give them, a couple extra months, or they can rent back from us for a couple of extra months, that's going into your negotiation. And that might be something that gives you a leg up. So always ask questions. So that way you get the full story. And then you can start to negotiate your offer based on your findings of just asking those questions on both sides, from the side that you're representing and also from the other side as well. Anything to add, Sam?
No, my main thing was that's what you mentioned at the end. That's why it's so critical to be asking questions, and then to do with what one of the agents mentioned earlier about listening. Don't bring up what is important to this other agent's clients. Ask the question and let them bring that information to you. And now for you being able to set the right expectations for your clients and properly communicate all of that to them, to advise them to your highest ability. Now you're not going to be able, you're not forcing anyone to do anything that they don't want to. But if you know that a 4-month closing period, while that is much longer than the traditional closing period, if you know that is the most important thing to these sellers, then you want that to be influenced in your offer. And if your clients aren't okay with that, at least you advise them to put them in the right position to get the deal done. But by finding that out in the first place, you have an awareness of really what matters most to the other side beyond just the price. And oftentimes the price can trump everything, but there are a lot of other things, especially in this current environment, that you not only have 2 offers on a property, you might have many as 20 and sometimes even more that are all coming in one weekend. Everyone is going to be looking at a high price. what are the other pieces that supplement the price, that really back up and make it a much more advantageous situation for all parties.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes it can come down to the loan type, as well, right? Sometimes it comes down to that, or how much earnest money deposit that you're putting onto, what an earnest money deposit looks like for the offer. And these are all things that you need to have that if you're representing your buyer, these are the conversations also that you need to be having with them when they put in the offer. In a market where there's only one offer, when it's not such a seller's market and you maybe have one or two offers on the property, say the earnest money deposit, they might say, well, I'm going to put down, 2,500, right? In this market, though, they might come up with like 5,000 or more, or 5% of the purchase price, because it's going to mean something more to the sellers, that they are locked into the deal. In today's market, in this market environment, in talking with other agents out there, because buyers are having to make decisions so quickly on homes right now. I mean, typically a buyer gets 15 minutes to look at a house because there's so many showings backed up and they're 15 minutes apart. A lot of times a buyer is getting 15 minutes to look at a house and make a decision if that's the house that they want to purchase. So they're not getting a great, whereas, a couple of years back, you maybe went and did 2 or 3 showings before you decided to put an offer in at a house. Now it's like you're in, and highest and best is typically due within the next 24 hours. So buyers are making fast decisions. And, what's happening is then buyers are breaking contracts because it's almost like a buyer's remorse thing. So if in your offer, you can give that seller peace of mind that your buyer is serious, they want the house, they have skin in the game, they're not just going to, frivolously, back out and kind of look for, a keyhole out of there. That's also going to give you a leg up in the process. So these are just all the things that you need to be talking about as you're starting your negotiation. You're going to start with if you're representing the buyer, it's going to start there, build your offer, and then you're going to present it to the listing agent.
And the last thing I would add there is when you're asking questions to the listing agent, if you're representing the buyer, of what matters to the sellers, also find out what matters to the listing agent. And something that comes to mind very quickly with that is, what is their comfort level and their opinion on escalation clauses. Some listing agents really don't like escalation clauses. And for anyone that's not aware of what that is, an escalation clause will say that my buyer or our offer will beat the next highest offer by X amount. So let's call it $5,000. If the list price is 300 and I have an escalation all the way up to 400,000, well, if the highest offer is 350, now our offer is automatically going to be 355, even if we started at 300. Or if we started at 320 or whatever that number might be that we had initially started at. So definitely speaking with the listing agent and see what terms do they really like the most when they're looking at offers, and are they okay with an escalation clause? Because if they are, that's going to give your buyer an opportunity to really have their number go much higher without necessarily needing to. But if the listing agent is not comfortable with those, because not all listing agents are, then not to be utilizing that, because they're going to show your offer, even if it's the same terms or a better number, they'll show it in a lower light if that's not the type of terms that they look for and that they really appreciate in an offer.
Yeah, good point.
Rhonda,
Any questions on that? Yeah, sure. We can go to the next slide. Does anybody have any questions?
A question. It might be a conversation for another time, but I know like a common point of negotiation right now is kind of like the appraisal gap issue. And I have a buyer that he's a first-time home buyer. We put a really strong offer, but he wasn't willing to, cover any of the appraisal gap if there was an issue. And I was wondering what you're kind of doing personally to combat that issue right now.
So we've had a couple of things that we've done here. One of them, and I recommend this basically at all times, is to speak with loan officers and with title attorneys to find out what they're seeing. Because all of us, if we're doing business at a really high level, we might be doing between 20 and 100 transactions a year if we're really killing it. However, sometimes they're doing that a month. So they're just seeing a lot more contracts than we are, finding out what terms they're seeing that are successful, because they're seeing the ones that are accepted, not just the ones that are offered. So that they'll start recognizing the commonalities between these different offers. So definitely continue to network with your vendor partners, lean on them to educate you on how you can serve your clients at the highest level. But one of the title attorneys in Rhode Island has let us know that she very frequently, and I think she does probably about 100 closings a month, they are seeing that for the buyers, in order to protect the buyer, but also give some leeway on the appraisal difference for the seller, that the buyer will come up out of pocket up to X amount to make up for the gap. So if there's a $20,000 gap, maybe they'll do up to 10,000. So if it's, you know, a $5,000 gap, it's covered. If it's a $10,000 gap, it's covered. If it's a $15,000 or $20,000 gap, they max out at that 10,000. So it's the maximum amount the buyer is comfortable going out of pocket. It allows the seller to still recoup that money that is below the purchase price, below the appraisal price, but also doesn't force the buyer to have to come up with everything. So I think that is a pretty good tool to be able to give your buyer the opportunity, have some level of leeway for the seller, especially as things are accelerating so quickly in the market value of properties, while not having them completely on the hook to come up 50, 60,000 above the appraised price.
Thank you.
And also too, on the side, if you're representing the seller, and you know that you have 12 offers coming in and many of them are way above asking price, you know, way above where you priced the property, where you priced it to market. It's a good idea as the listing agent to have that conversation with your seller at that point too, and just let them know, you know, hey, we can take this offer that's, you know, 40,000 over our asking price. We can take it, but let's just be cognizant that it does have to appraise, especially if all of your offers are mortgaged, right? I mean, cash is cash, and if somebody's doing cash and there's no appraisal, then, you know, I mean, that's awesome. And as talking to buyers who have a mortgage and they're not cash, like it just kind of like, you know, let's set you up in the best light possible. But if somebody is cash, that usually gives them a leg up, unless your lender, as Sam said, speaking with your lender, sometimes they can waive an appraisal or they can do, you know, kind of help out with, you know, with that. But it's also a good thing to have that conversation with your seller up front to say, listen, we have all these offers, they're all mortgaged, everybody's going to have an appraisal. So we can take this offer, but we're just going to know that if it doesn't appraise, we may need to renegotiate at some point, right? Or if you only have one offer on the property and there's a mortgage on it, you know, it's okay to kind of set that up is part of your negotiation, just to get the little bug in your seller's mind that we still have to appraise and there's a chance that we're going to have to renegotiate it if we don't. And so what that's doing is it's setting the expectation for your seller. So when the time comes and if for some reason it does not appraise, you've already preempted that conversation. So they're not so far down that path. They're not a month down the path now of counting those dollars that's going to go in their pocket. And then you're kind of throwing on them like, oh, we didn't appraise, now we need to go and renegotiate. They're already going to be thinking that in their mind. It'll set up that renegotiation at some point. It'll make it go a lot smoother.
Rhonda, one of the things that I found out with the higher, you know, when they're really over, is going back to them and saying, hey, do you guys want to provide gap coverage too? Because if it's gonna appraise so low, can you give us a certain, you know, security blanket? And that seems to go pretty far with people as well. I mean, we had to do that when we bought our house. And I know a lot of people, when they're selling their house, they're saying, you know, hey, you know, 450 sounds great. We listed it for 400. You want to give us a gap coverage of, you know, say 50 and 20,000. How does that sound with you guys? Instead of just, you know, it just gives you that little bit of space.
Absolutely. That's a great point, Michael. Thank you. Love that.
Can you do that if you have an FHA mortgage though?
I want to say, and I'm only going to say this, Karen, just because when my son bought a house last year, he was FHA. And I remember calling his lender and asking, because we were a little worried about the appraisal. And even with FHA, I believe if they are going to bring more money to the table, that the buyer can fill that gap if they need to. That's a best question I would always ask the lender in every situation. and just ask if that is possible. That was my experience with my son when he was an FHA. And I've also had that experience with a VA buyer as well. But they were putting down, bigger down payment. So it's always a question for a lender.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions?
I have a question, and it's just kind of, I'd like to get more familiar with it, and I'm not sure if we were going to cover it somewhere else, but since we're talking about terms, could you tell us more about kick-out clauses, advantages and disadvantages?
A
When
kick
you-
out, give me an example.
Well, I'm not sure how they're applied, but in somewhat of my understanding of it is people that have their properties listed can go forward with continuing to show their property, but they have offers on the table. But if they get better offers, they get to take the better offer or give the other party the opportunity to make a better offer or something to that effect. That's what I want to know about. And if it's a benefit or if it's like we were discussing, that if it's one of the things that the listing agents don't want to deal with, or I just want to see how it's factoring in.
So from my perspective, the only time we ever really see that, at least here, and obviously keep in mind every state's going to be a little bit different. But the only time we ever really see it here is if the buyer has a contingency that they sell their own home in order to purchase the new one. So for Julie, for me to buy your home, I'd have to sell my home first. And in that scenario, you have the opportunity to continue showing your home, and then Rhonda makes an offer on it. And for whatever reason, it doesn't have to be any better terms. You just want to move forward with Rhonda's offer. You'd be able to, however, I have a set amount of time as a first right of refusal. So I would have to decide, am I willing to hold these two mortgages, or am I even able to in a short-term period before I sell my own property? Basically, will I remove that contingency? And traditionally, what we see is between 24 and 72 hours of that first right of refusal time period, that Rhonda is kind of in the balance. She doesn't know yet if I'm moving forward or not. If I remove the contingency, I have to sell my home, then I move forward and Rhonda has to continue her search. But it also gives you the opportunity as a seller to bring in a buyer that you're more comfortable with, or have your current buyer remove the contingency. Now, the only thing to mention there is if my offer was for 300 and Rhonda's offer is for 320, I don't have to make up the difference. I just have to remove the contingency that I'm selling my own home. Now, I believe what you're referring to might be a little bit different than that. It sounds like it is in the negotiations with the seller, you're giving them the option to find a different buyer during, let's say, my inspection period, if they choose to. And then after the inspections, they probably would lose that kick out clause. I haven't seen that here. I think in theory, it is a good option to be able to give your buyer a leg up, but it really gives them no level of stability. So you'd want to absolutely make sure that you have the verbiage very strongly with an attorney put together, and that you're getting the attorney's advice in general on is this something that I should ever recommend for my client to do. I see some level of appeal. It just doesn't happen here, other than in the situation that I have to sell my own home in order to purchase yours.
Thank you.
That was a great question, Julie. Great question. All right, great. All right, let's go move on to the next slide, Sam.
One thing I just want to mention before we fully jump into this next one, I think what Julie brings up is just something good to monitor. I mean, we have a very wide network within Keller Williams, and I'm sure you know agents that are part of different brokerages in other parts of the country. I think we can take bits and pieces from what everyone's doing, and maybe there's some nuance that happens in New Hampshire or in North Carolina or in Florida that doesn't happen in your state. And then if you can bring that concept and idea to your attorneys that you work with in your state, find out, one, is it legal? Two, how would you approach it? It might be something that can give you a leg up compared to other people, because no other agents are thinking to do that locally. And to give you an example of this, my cousin-in-law is a realtor in North Carolina, and I'm in Rhode Island. North Carolina, they have for their inspections that the buyer gives a non-refundable deposit, because every home is sold as is in North Carolina. So non-refundable deposit on top of their traditional deposit. So basically the non-refundable deposit is me giving you, the seller, money for the rights to be able to do more due diligence on your home, because right now you're coming off the market for a certain time period. Now that doesn't happen here at all. And I'm sure for a lot of all of you, it doesn't happen where you are. But knowing that there's a lot of competition on the buyer side, if I take that from my cousin and I speak to my closing attorney here and see what their thoughts are on that, one, can I do it? Two, is there any situation that I should? And what situations does that look like? Well, now it might be something to give me a leg up and my clients a leg up compared to any other agent that is working locally, because that's just not the way business is done here. Doesn't mean it's not done that way somewhere though. So we can always take bits and pieces, but obviously making sure that you're doing it in the right fashion and doing it in a legal manner.
Can you explain gap coverage?
Rhonda, would you like to lead that?
Sure. So, so yes, Janice, and I just saw your message in the chat. So thank you. I was going to go back to that. So gap coverage is in regards to an appraisal. And if the appraisal, if the house doesn't appraise, it is covering the amount that is where the gap is. So if a home is under contract for $350 and say it appraises at $325, so there's a $25,000 gap there. And so gap coverage would come into play to say that if the appraisal comes in at, where our offers for $350, and we can cover up to $10,000 of the gap insurance. So if it comes in at $325, we'll kick in another $10,000 to bring it up to $335. And so we're going to cover that gap. And then you would renegotiate that remaining 15. You would want to negotiate that remaining 15,000 with the seller.
But where does the lender come into that? I mean, the appraisal is the appraisal. So what does that, it almost sounds like insurance to me that you're asking for from the lender. So why would the lender approve or not approve it?
So the money would be coming from the buyer.
Right.
So the buyer would have to come in and give an extra $10,000 at closing to be able to close that gap. And then the rest of the gap will have to get covered in most cases, unless they're doing, sometimes if there's a gap and it's a conventional mortgage, right? So say if it's a conventional mortgage and the buyer's putting down $20,000, putting down 20%. And so it's still, and I'm not a lender, so I would always check with the lender just to make sure what I'm saying is correct. This is just in my experience. Sometimes if somebody's doing a conventional mortgage, they're going to put down 20% because they don't want PMI. So they're going to put down 20%. The mortgage on the house might be, the house might be being sold, and I'm going to really try to do math really quickly in my head, but like just say that, right? What they're mortgaging on the house, say they're offering 600 and say they're putting down 200,000. So the mortgage is only 400,000. And now the house appraises for 550. So it didn't appraise for purchase price, but it did appraise for what the mortgage is covering, but yet it doesn't equal their 20%. So the buyer then would either bring the extra money to the table in order to cover that. But in that case, the bank would still approve it because it did appraise for what the bank is into it for. In the case where it's like FHA or VA and it doesn't appraise, those government loans, it does have to appraise for the purchase price. So if there was gap coverage by the buyer for an additional 10,000, but it left 15,000 remaining, then at that point, the seller's going to have to renegotiate and come down to meet the
Okay, now I get it. It has nothing to do with the lender approving it. It has to do with the ability of the buyer to have the money to pay the difference versus the appraised price and the agreed purchase price.
Yeah, in essence, I mean, the bank is always going to put their stamp on it at the end because they have their rules and regulations. But yeah, that is the concept of it.
Okay,
And Sam,
I just hadn't heard that term, so thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
And the main thing is there that obviously the buyer still has to have the loan approved for the bank's portion. So if I had to bring $10,000 for my down payment, and now I'm having to come up with another 10,000. Well, if I only had $10,000 in the bank, the bank's not going to get me approved basically at that point anymore. So that they'll only approve me for their section, their portion of it. And if I'm bringing any money separately, my portion with the bank still needs to be covered.
Perfect.
Any other
Great.
questions?
Great question.
All right, we'll move on to the next one. Rhonda, I think we'll probably jump into the three Ps section.
Sure. Yep, sounds good. Okay, so we're going to talk about the 3 Ps of negotiation. And does anybody know what those are, the 3 Ps? You read through your stuff ahead of time? What's the first one? Anybody?
Prepare.
Prepare. Yep, prepare. So the first P, the 3 Ps approach, the first one is prepare. So preparation is the key to building confidence and ensuring a smooth transaction. What's the second one?
Present.
Present. Yep. So first you're going to prepare to negotiate, then you're going to present your negotiation. Okay. And this is where your your style comes in. This is where your etiquette comes in. This is where your your ability to communicate comes in, and your ability to kind of hold back your emotion if the negotiation is kind of being met with some resistance. And sometimes, sometimes it is, and it's not, and that's always not an easy, that's not always an easy thing to do. Sometimes, different, agents have different, we all have different personalities as well. And everybody has a different style in their communication. Some agents, if they, right from the get-go, if they don't maybe like what the offer that you presented, sometimes they kind of come at you kind of fast and furious and say like, what are you, nuts? And you have to be able to just kind of hold the line in that. So it definitely is it is something to practice and to not take it personally, right? And sometimes if you are there, I have been in situations with a listing agent where I had a buyer one time that we were negotiating a condo, and the buyer just he just did not want to go past I think it was like, I don't know, 312 or something was his line in the sand. He's not going to go above 312. The listing agent came back and said 315. And so we were $3,000 apart. And I talked to the buyer. I don't like to call him my buyer. I talked to the buyer that I was representing, and I said, the sellers come back and their line is 315. Your line's 312. So what are we going to do? We're $3,000 away. This is sometimes when you have to have that big picture talk. It's $3,000. I understand that money is money. However, you're going to be in this condo for the next, 5 to 7 years from our conversations. So is $3,000 enough for you to walk away from? Or are there enough things, does it tick enough boxes for you where, that $3,000 is going to make it palatable for you to move forward? And he said, I will go, I can do 315, but I really want 312. Like, he's like, I really, really don't want to pay more than 312 for this. And I said, okay, fine. I said, I will go back one more time and I will talk to the listing agent about it, and I'll see what he say. Well, when I went back to the listing agent, he like completely lost his cool with me. And, he was like, kind of was yelling at me a little bit. And, and all I said was, I kind of just said, listen, we're on the same page here. Listen, we're on the same page. Your seller wants to sell, the buyer wants to buy it. I'm just asking a question because that's really where he would like to be. And if 315, if your guy's not going to go a penny under that, then I respect that, and that's okay. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to let the buyer know that, and then I'm going to come back to you with our final decision. So it's not always easy to do that, but sometimes it's okay to just reset the conversation and just really nicely remind the other side, like, hey, listen, we're on the same side here. We want the same thing here. So that's fine. If this is what you're telling me, then I will go back, and let me go back, and then I'm going to come back to you, and then hopefully we can put it together. So it just you try not to get kind of flustered when that happens, and just kind of know that it's just a conversation that you're having. And I have to say that after that transaction, that agent and I are actually like very, very close in our respect for, like, I respect that agent a ton, because as soon as I said that, he was like, you know what, you're onto your right. And we have a great relationship now, like moving forward. And as Sam said earlier, when I bring somebody to see one of his homes, he knows that he knows what he's getting as far as if we are going to enter into negotiation together. So, you know, that that's like where all of your kind of you know, your personality and your style is going to come into. So that's super, super important. And then the third one is position. And that is just where you just keep, like I said, conversation. You're just going to keep inching forward until you find the place of common ground between the buyer and the seller. And at that point, if you can do that, that is where you move on to the next phase.
One thing I want to add before we get into each of these a little bit deeper, exactly what it says here, negotiation is a skill that can be learned and perfected with experience. No matter how long or short somebody's been in the business, they could be a great negotiator or a terrible negotiator. And something to recognize as a newer agent yourself is the other person, they don't know what you're supposed to say. They don't know what your script is going to look like. They don't know what your skill set is. So just go into it confidently and understanding that today, tomorrow you'll be just that much better than you are today. And no matter what happens, you know, things will continue to move in the right direction for both you and your clients. So every day, take bits and pieces from everyone and start implementing it for yourself, practicing it yourself, and then just doing the activities will help you be more comfortable. So you're not going to be perfect today. You're not going to be perfect after transaction 100 or 10 years from now. There is no perfect. You just have to continue to progress over time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's such a great point. Okay, so let's talk about prepare and let's dive in a little bit deeper into that. So as you're preparing to write your offer and enter into a negotiation, so first and foremost, you have to know what the goal is of your client. You need to know what their end game is and what their goal is. Don't be afraid to, you know, don't be afraid to ask questions. And sometimes, you know, clients, sometimes they don't give us all the information up front, right? Sometimes, I mean, you know, back, you know, years ago when I wasn't always really great at asking a lot of questions, you know, I would say, well, what is the, you know, what is the top you want to pay for the property? And they would say, I don't know. You know, I'm going to start my offer here at X. But I don't know. I'm not really sure yet where, you know, where I want to go. Sometimes they don't want to tell you because they don't want you to, they're afraid maybe you're going to go say something to the other side. So I would say always the negotiation process, it's going to start with trust between you and your client. Your client needs to understand that they can trust you, that you have their back, and that you are going to represent them and their best interest only. Sometimes there is a misconception, and sometimes there is, you know, a buyer or a seller might be a little bit worried that, oh, you know, if you're friends with that other agent, you know, you guys are going to be trying to kind of do your own thing in between. It's always super important that your clients know that you are representing them and their best interest only. Regardless if the client, the listing agent or the agent on the other side of the transaction is your sister or your brother or your best friend in the whole wide world, you need to make sure that you are respecting that you are representing your client and that you are not giving information to the other side that you have not been consented to do so. So you want to get to that point where your client's going to be super honest with you about what their goal is, so that way you can better negotiate for them, right? So that goes into like also knowing your client. Think ahead, right? Think ahead and try to anticipate, you know, the way the negotiation is going to go. Now, this market's totally different than, you know, the market of a couple of years ago, where there really was a true negotiation process. Negotiate like long drawn out negotiations, you know, as Sam was mentioning, he has one going on right now. You know, those are happening kind of far and few between right now. That may be on a house that's been sitting on the market for a while because it's really overpriced. In those instances, when you can grant to your client a one-on-one conversation with a seller, like that is something that is so special these days and very hard to come by. In most cases, everything's highest and best offer. You have like one shot to put your best foot forward with your, you know, with your offer. And you have to make sure that all of those things are just kind of going into that first initial offer. In this case, saying like, think ahead, you still have to do that. You have to think ahead as far as, okay, how many offers are on the table? right? How many offers, it's highest to best. And again, how many questions did I ask of the listing agent that they answered for me? So I kind of know going in on the other side what the situation is with the seller. Setting clear expectations if it's your buyer, setting clear expectations with whoever you're representing. Letting them know that this is what could happen. There's only, this is what could happen, right? This comes up a lot of times too in like inspection contingencies, repair addendums. I'll say to a buyer, one of three things is going to happen, right? We just put together this repair addendum. These are all your asks. This is everything you want the seller to address. One of three things is going to happen. The seller is going to say, okay, and he's going to take care of all of them, or she. The seller is going to come back and renegotiate with us and maybe take care of some things and not take care of other things, maybe offer to give a credit versus fixing things. Or the seller is going to say, I'm not doing anything at all. So one of those three things is going to happen. And then that's going to, then we're going to talk about what we're going to do next. So just kind of keep it in your mind's eye that of all those things, what happens, what's going to be your reaction to that, and how are we going to deal with that? Especially if a seller comes back and says, I'm not negotiating and I'm doing nothing for these inspections. Now you're going to have to go back, and now you got to make a decision on whether or not you're moving forward. The next one is to be informed, right? Be informed, understand all the tools that you can use. Like we were just talking about gap insurance. We were talking about kick-out clauses. Be informed about all the tools that you can use when putting together and getting ready to negotiate, and asking questions of lenders, attorneys, utilizing the professionals that are there in our in our world. Right now, for those of you that are new, ask your coach, ask your OP, ask your team leader. We're all here to ask your mentor. We're all here to help you through the process. So if there's something you don't understand or you're not sure about, it's always great to ask for help. And even as a seasoned or experienced agent as well, like Sam said, we're not perfect. Doesn't matter how many transactions we do, we're always learning new things. So seek out and get advice from another agent or from your OP or your team leader when you're putting things together, regardless of what your experience level is. Always obey the law. And know your documents. Know the documents inside and out. Make sure you're reviewing all of the purchase and sale agreement, the addendums, the escalation clause, and know what goes into them and what the terms are. So that way you can make sure that you are protecting your client.
Couple things I want to bring up here. So the be informed, Rhonda mentioned about the different clauses that we can use and whatnot. We've spoken already about how some states do things a little bit differently. Maybe that is a way of being informed and having tools in your belt that other people aren't aware of in your local market. But then the obey the laws portion, you have to make sure that if something's happening elsewhere, that it can also happen where you are. Even if it's not common practice, that it is something that you can and should be doing for your clients. So always make sure that you're leaning on your vendor partners for them to be able to educate you on the things that your license doesn't cover specifically. And then with the knowing the documents inside and out, I think this is something that a lot of agents, it can give them some pause that if they don't know how to put together a purchase and sales agreement or how to put together a listing agreement, they can't call anybody in the first place. And that absolutely is not the case. You can write the best document in the world, the best purchase and sales agreement in the world. And if you have no clients, what's going to end up happening, if you're not picking up the phone to talk to anybody, what's going to end up happening is you're going to do it for me for $15 an hour. And that's not where any of us are wanting to be. So you will learn these things as you're having to do them. Knowing them inside and out will happen over time. The biggest portion with that, especially in the beginning, is that you are at least taking 10, 15, 30 minutes to review the document as you've sent it over to your client. That way, if they say, hey, what does this part mean? You're able to just read that and have an understanding. A lot of it is common sense, but any times that you do have questions, you're able to lean on your mentor, on your coach, on other agents in your market center, the other leadership for your market center. You have a lot of people that are available to you for you to really get an expertise very quickly when needed, but you don't need that expertise before you ever go on a showing, before you ever tell your friends and family that you're now in real estate.
Absolutely.
And then, excuse me, but before we get into any other questions here, the setting clear expectations, one of the times to be most aware of doing this, at least in my opinion, is when you are working with friends and family. And I tell you this from experience. I've done the last couple of years, probably over 100 transactions, maybe close to 200 transactions. And for the first time last summer, I worked with one of my friends for him to buy a home. And I gave him too much credit for just being around me, that he then knew how real estate works, how the transaction process worked, what the market conditions were. And I, in hindsight, could have done a much better job of educating him and setting clear expectations. And it got to the point that he actually asked me if I wanted him to call the listing agent to put in the last negotiation, which he was just not doing anything to my advice the whole time. But I do know that in hindsight, I could have set better expectations of, this is the conditions of the market. I understand that this is your first time going through it, and you might be thinking that you're going to come here and get a deal. That's not what's happening right now. These are the market conditions. This is my role. This is what everything that I'm going to do here for you. This is what to expect as we're going through negotiations. And I know that he would have had a much better experience. And I would have had a much better experience too. He also probably would have been able to move into that place 3 weeks earlier and had 3 weeks less of rent payments at his previous place if I would have set better expectations up front. So it doesn't only go for people that you've met through a Facebook ad or at an open house. It goes for the people that are closest to you and that you have some of the strongest relationships with. Those people too, you have to set really good expectations for.
Great point.
Any questions? All right.
Okay. Great. So asking open-ended questions, and then we're going to do in your participant guide on page 9, we're going to do the activity there. But talking about open-ended questions versus close-ended questions. So when you're asking questions, there's a combination of both, right? You're going to want to weave in both, but definitely we need to know the difference. So an open-ended question is a question that has an unlimited response options. What additional information do I need to know? Why is it important that we close in 30 days? What's important to you about that? And how do you feel about that, right? That is just asking a question and then allowing your client to answer the question with any response that they feel like they want to respond with. Versus a close-ended question, do you have to sell your home by a specific date? That's a yes or no. Yes, no, or one word. Do you have any other offers on the property? You're going to ask that question a lot. Every time you show a house, you should always ask the listing agent, do you have any offers on the property currently? These days, like you're asking that question when you call to book a showing, you're kind of asking that question. I'm just calling to see if the property is still available and do you have any offers currently on the property? And so in those instances, that's perfect. Closed-ended question is perfectly fine. What is the bottom line price you would consider? If only we were so lucky that when somebody would give us that answer. However, sometimes that's right. You got to come in and beat around that one. But that's the difference between an open-ended and a closed-ended question. Does anybody else have an example? Give me another example of an open-ended question. Just one? Somebody give me just one. And then we'll move on to the
What are your top 3 priorities when selling?
Perfect. Yep, absolutely. And that's a great question to ask, Laura. That's such a good question to know.
Yeah, think about how much power is there. They start telling you our top priorities are price, the time frame, and making sure there's really smooth communication. Well, how many more open-ended questions can you ask just off of those? And now through that one question, those 3 topics they brought up, you're going to find out just about everything regarding their motivation and their situation, which is going to help you if you're representing them. It's going to help you represent them to a much higher capacity and just do better by them by being able to keep their own goals top of mind for them during the times that they might get a little cloudy on what they're looking to achieve. or they might just have a little bit too much emotion or stress wrapped up in the situation. And then if you're negotiating against them, if they're on the opposite side, you know what to highlight in your offer. You know what terms are going to be most important, and might also sometimes give you a little bit of insight into things that maybe you weren't aware of that can help you get a better situation for your client overall.
Awesome. Yeah, that was great. So let's turn in the participant guide. And it says, read the scenario below, circle or underline the key areas in which you need more information or certainty before you could confidently negotiate on your client's behalf. Write 3 specific questions you would ask your client in the space provided below. So let's just go on a quick, we'll take 5 minutes. Do a quick 5 minutes. You guys read that, write down some questions, and then we'll come back and review them before we move on to the next section. Does that sound good? Okay, so it is, it's 10:02, so we'll see you guys back here at like 10:07. Okay. Okay, how'd everybody do? Who wants to share? Let's just have a couple people share. So well, I'm gonna read through the scenario first, and then you guys tell me some of the questions you came up with. So the scenario, you are representing a single buyer. Your client is renting her property, her present property. Like any first-time buyer, she is looking to you to guide her through the process. The asking price for the home she really loves is $175,000. The house appears to have evidence of a roof leak, is listed as is, and is correctly priced. Your client would like to keep her payments as low as possible since she has a number of student loans to pay off. She wants to write an offer for $155,000. There has been quite a bit of activity on the listing. So somebody give me what you wrote down for one of your clarifying questions to ask this client.
I would ask her, when is her lease up and is she able to break it? Does she know if there'd be a charge with breaking her lease?
Okay. And by knowing that information, Pam, how would that help you by knowing that information?
Well, you'd know kind of the timetable too. If she can kind of fit into this, she wants to make an offer now, but what will it cost her on the other end?
Yep, exactly, right? It might be something you can use in negotiation as to when she can close on, the property. Okay, so somebody else?
I was interested in, I know she wants to keep her payment at a certain amount, so I'm assuming it's not cash. And how much cash is she putting down? And so I'd be interested in that.
Okay, great. Great, yep. To find out what her mortgage terms are going to be.
I would be interested, I think it's more like the loan officer, like where her tax bracket is to be safe, where to make sure that her payments remain low.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Yep. In most mortgage scenarios, the taxes and insurance are the escrows that are built in. So when somebody says, I want to keep my payment here, you have to also, make sure that you're factoring in the taxes on the property. So that way because that's going to add to their mortgage payment. Okay, anybody else?
How high she's willing to go above the 155 if needed.
Mm-hmm. Now that says also in here that the house appears to have evidence of a roof leak and is listed as is. What question might you ask around that?
What type of loan is she getting? Meaning FHA conventional.
Yeah, exactly. There's mortgage companies out there that if it is leaking, they want to see at least 2 years of life left on a roof. So exactly. And maybe also asking this buyer in particular if she has extra money put away so that she can address the roof leak. Sam, would you add anything?
I have a couple if nobody else has any. I'm looking for something that is going to really help us progress this along for our client. Is there anything you guys can think of?
Also, is she even pre-qualified? Does she know what she can afford? I mean, we didn't kind of address that one.
Are we talking about the concessions? Is she going to be asking for concessions?
So in my view here, we're already representing this person. We probably have an understanding of what their loan amount is, what they're pre-qualified for, what type of financing they're doing. So I'm looking for things. She wants to put in an offer 155. We know there's a roof leak. We know the property's as is, and it's correctly priced at 175. So in regards to this property specifically, and this situation overall, what can we ask her?
One of my questions was, how badly does she want this property? Because I'm not sure that's a strong enough offer.
So yeah, that's exactly along the lines of what I'm thinking here. Either how badly does she want it, or is she okay with not getting it?
Mhm.
155, we're going to do whatever the client wants to do. We're not forcing anyone to do anything. We're not convincing anyone to do anything. We're not used car salesmen. We don't put $19.99 on a price and then somebody thinks they're getting a good deal. We advise them and help them get to the goals that they have for themselves. So is she okay with not getting this property? If she is, then she might have to sometimes go through the pain of losing out on a few places. And that's going to help us over time create better expectations, prepare her better. Because we're speaking about this prepare section of putting together offers and negotiating. Sometimes that's just educating your client. Now, if she is making this offer for 155 because of the roof leak, and she's thinking that she's going to have all this money out of pocket for the roof, so she wants to, because she's keeping her payments lower and she's going to have some money out of pocket that she's going to have to fix up the roof after closing. Is she seeing that as a $20,000 difference? Does she know the difference between 155 and 175, what that does for her on those monthly payments? Everything that I've seen, truthfully, that $20,000 is probably coming out to somewhere between, I would say, $60 and $80 a month.
Mhm.
So if she's thinking this roof is going to cost me $20,000, well, how much is the roof actually going to cost? This leak, is it going to cost $150 to fix the leak and now we have to never worry about it again, or at least not worry about it for another 10 years? Does it need a brand new roof completely? And if it does, is the roof going to cost 20 grand? Is it going to cost 2 grand? What does that look like? And then maybe can we also wrap that into the cost of the loan? Can we do some sort of rehab loan? Is that something she's comfortable with? Could we ask for some sort of credit? Maybe we're going to have a slightly higher purchase price than the 155, because then she can wrap in some of her closing costs. And that will allow her to maybe have a little bit more money in her bank after closing to pay whatever this sum is for the roof. But my opinion, the biggest thing we have to figure out is why this number. What do you see that's for 155? Are you okay with not getting it? What are your hesitations here? Is this the right house for you? Like if it's truly worth 175, where's the disconnect? And is that something that should be overcome? Is that something that can be overcome? Or is it maybe just not the right property? Or if it's only the right property at 155, because that's okay too.
Awesome. Great point, Sam. So what are some ahas around that, around what Sam just said?
Well, I think there's some ahas here, not just from what I was speaking about, but from what everyone else is speaking about too. Part of preparing with our clients and setting expectations is having an understanding. What type of financing are they doing? What type of monthly payments are they comfortable with doing? They might be approved for $400,000, but if they only want what will equal $250 in terms of monthly payments, then that's all that they're looking at. But what are they okay with on a monthly payment situation? Are they okay with having a property that needs work? I think these are all things that all of you guys were mentioning. So we look at the client as a whole, and then we look at the situation for that one property as a whole, and blend the two together like a Venn diagram to see if there's something that can come together, if it's the right situation for them. But I do want to point out, as we're speaking about ahas, absolutely not just what I was speaking about here. I think there's a lot that all of you mentioned that I see as ahas. We need to have a full understanding of this client and making sure that we understand their situation, their motivation, and doing what we then can do to get them to the right end goal.
Well, it goes to show you how important doing a buyer consultation really is. Sitting down and having that meeting, because you would find all this out. I'm in a situation right now where it's moving fast. Met somebody at an open house. I'm trying to get them to sign a buyer agency agreement. Now they want to go see this house again tonight. And so I really haven't had the time to sit down and get to know these people. So all this is good information for me going forward later on today.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I would say my big aha from all of this is that, you know, is just asking questions, right? The more questions that you can ask, you know, the better off that you're going to be, and the better you're going to be able to represent your seller or your buyer. So just ask questions, ask open-ended questions, make sure you know, ask questions to follow up on their answers. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And revisit them too. You know, Chuck, I mean, you might ask a lot of these questions in the buyer consultation, and then, you know, you're going to ask them all again for each house that you are offering on, because they'll have a different motivation for each property that they look at. And so it's okay to ask them again, and to say, you know, hey, remind me, hey, we talked about this at one time. Can you like remind me about what you said? And sometimes we just get a little like, oh, I should probably already know that. And so I don't want to ask them again because they're going to think I wasn't paying attention, or they're going to think I'm, whatever. But it's okay to say, hey, remind me what you said about this. Okay, anyone else before we move on? All right, Sam, let's do it. Okay, so now the second P is present. So we're going to pay attention to verbal and nonverbal cues when we're presenting an offer. Once you present the offer, just quiet down and let the other side speak. Let the other side have a response to what you either told them. If you're on the phone with them, you know, obviously you're going to follow up with everything in writing. I think keep quiet is probably one of the hardest things to do, because we always try to fill that gap of silence, right? Sometimes silence can be uncomfortable. And so a lot of times we just feel like we're just going to keep filling it and talking, but present your offer and then just keep quiet to give the other side time to respond. Listen carefully to what is important to the other party. So then when they do respond, and I think Pam maybe said this at one point, listen to what they're saying, right? Instead of just, you know, preparing to kind of what you're going to say to them next. So just listen carefully to what's important to them. And stay calm and relaxed. Focus on the customer's needs, right? You're representing their best interest. So focus on what they need. And at the same time, be collaborative though, to get everybody to common ground if you can do so. And give your offer the best chance.
Couple other things I want to add before we get into any questions is, when you are presenting the offer, especially with how digital the world is, you know, almost every offer is just sent through email. I highly advise that you not only have the PDF attached, but give an overview of the offer. Make it easier for the agent to present that offer to their own client. So having a detailed overview. Now, you don't have to have 4 paragraphs worth of information there and have it take you 30 minutes, but you can highlight, this is our purchase price. This is especially the down payment amount and the type of financing, because at least in our purchase and sales agreements here, you do have to actually look to see what the actual down payment amount is. So being able to highlight that, you know, you can mention something maybe about your relationship with these people, how long you've worked with them, you know, just being able to give an overview of what this offer and what their situation looks like, because that's going to arm the listing agent with more information in a easier and more accessible fashion for them to now be able to communicate to their client. And then also it's completely fine to not only email that, but then also text or give them a phone call. And if Rhonda's the listing agent, I'm giving Rhonda a call. Hey, Rhonda, I want to let you know we just put an offer in at 123 Main Street. Rhonda may have already seen the email. She might have already decided, you know what, this isn't the right offer. But at least now I'm getting her on the phone and letting her know about it. Rhonda, we put in an offer for 123 Main Street. These are the highlights. You know, I'd love to be able to get a deal together. If there's any questions you have, or, you know, anything that you would like to discuss, I'm available. Send me a text, give me a call. I'd love to be able to get this one together with you. Because that's going to help you. If you don't know that agent from a hole in the wall, you have no idea who that person is. You know, I'm sure there's probably thousands of agents in each of your MLSs. Being able to now introduce yourself and start that relationship can make it a lot more smoother later on.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If they have 12 offers in and they haven't spoken to you, you're just another piece of paper that came into their email versus putting some personality and kind of making it, kind of humanizing it a little bit. So absolutely, like you can't have too many conversations. Conversations are good.
I put in an offer that is 20,000 below the offer that is projected to be accepted. And I never pick up the phone. I never call. I never text. I only send that email. And that agent doesn't know me. Well, in that scenario, that listing agent is very likely to send an email back. Thank you for your offer. The client decided to go in another direction. If I pick up the phone and call that very same agent and I'm still 20,000 below on my offer, and I say, hey, Rhonda, this is Sam Alpern with Keller Williams. Just want to let you know we put in this offer for 123 Main Street for X amount. And Rhonda says, yeah, I noticed, I saw that. We actually have an offer that's a lot better. What range will we need to be at? What is the difference that we have to make up here in terms of terms, and in terms of the financing type, the closing period, the purchase price? What is the difference between that offer and ours? I can ask Rhonda that question now. And Rhonda's also a lot more apt to give out that information if I have her on the phone versus just emailing saying we went in a different direction. If she tells me that when I call her on the phone, she says, yeah, I noticed that we're going to be sending an email out to everyone shortly. The seller is most likely going to go in a different direction. Well, now if Rhonda's not just going to give me the reasoning and what I need to do to make up the difference, I can at least ask that question. And we know that it's a lot more difficult for somebody to say no to us or ghost us in some fashion if I have them on the phone versus if I just send them a text or an email. Like thinking of any other prospect. If I text someone and say, hey, George, how's it going? I want to see how you and the family are doing. This is Sam Alpern with Keller Williams. George might never respond to me. But if I have George on the phone and I say, hi, George, he says, yep. I say, this is Sam Alpern with Keller Williams. Want to see how you're doing. How's everything for you and the family? George might hang up the phone, but it's going to be a lot more difficult for George to do that without having some sort of response, even if it's, it's not a good time. And then I get to ask when is a good time because I have them on the phone. Same thing when we're making offers and presenting them to the other side.
I had a quick question. If you're going to send out your email, how soon would you text or call? Do you give them a little time to digest that information or immediately, or what? How do you do that?
I would do it immediately. I don't see any reason why not to, because now we're just getting to start the relationship sooner. And if you haven't, especially if there might be a better offer out there, I want to have a conversation with you immediately before you speak to your client, because you now speak to your client, they might verbally accept another one and it will be harder for me to make up the difference. But if I'm speaking to you immediately, even if I'm leaving a voicemail and I'm saying, hi, this is Sam Alpern. Just want to let you know we put in an offer. If you need anything, give me a call. We'd love to get this together. Whatever we need to go over here, I'd love to have a conversation. At least I'm going that extra mile. Rhonda, do you feel any differently, or does anyone else feel differently?
No, I agree with you 100%. Absolutely. 100%. Do it right away. Put it in and let them know that it's there.
You also never know if someone maybe clicked on an email. Like, think of how easy is it to open a text or open an email, then you get a phone call coming in. All of a sudden you completely forgot about that email and you went into your next email. And now it's like that one doesn't even exist for you. So it's too easy with technology to miss those things, like not in a malicious way, but just to have it happen that accidentally you glanced over it, or you deleted it, or you it went to your spam folder, you archived it by accident, whatever it might be. So now if I pick up the phone, it's going to make it, someone might say, I actually realized that I just deleted that by accident. Can you send it back over to me? Or I haven't seen that. Well, I can say I sent it a couple of minutes ago, it might be in your spam folder. That could theoretically happen. So if I pick up the phone immediately, it's going to mitigate any chance of that actually happening. Even if it's already really minimal, it's just me at minimum starting the conversation and building a relationship with this other person.
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. And I love that because I mean, we all get so many emails, I mean, every day. And I know there's, and we do get a lot of emails that are, spam or people, trying to, whatever, informational that you might try to clean out of your inbox. And sometimes you do, sometimes you get a little delete key happy and you might mistakenly delete something. And if somebody didn't call and say, hey, I sent that offer to you, you would hate, and maybe it's the highest offer. And you're like, oh my God, I never even saw it. And if that agent didn't just check in with you to say, hey, I sent it, did you get it? And you say, no, I didn't, you know what, I didn't see it, right? So just always be in the habit of, I know we're technology driven now, and sometimes texting and emailing is so much easier, yet don't underestimate the power of a, phone to phone, face to face conversation with somebody. And, let them hear your voice and let them hear your, your personality. Get in the habit of smiling when you're on the phone with people, because they can hear that in your voice, and that immediately it's gonna draw them to you, and they're gonna be like, oh gosh, I talked to Julie today. She was so sweet on the phone. She was so nice. Or, I spoke to Adrian. He was so nice. And that's right. He said that he had sent the offer over to me. And so, I mean, that's a complete opportunity for you, as Sam said, to start that relationship with an agent and give them a little insight into who you are and how you work. And, maybe like Sam said, maybe their offer is not the highest. It also gives you an opportunity to say, hey, look, I know we're 20,000 under asking price. This is why. This is why. And if you feel that if there's something else that I need to know that I can go back and talk to my buyer about, because they really want the house, but this is kind of where we were coming from with our offer, it gives you that opportunity for that conversation and to already kind of start negotiating a little bit on a one-on-one with them, versus it just being a sea of 12 offers and you're 20,000 under, and it gets just thrown out to the side because they just are like, meh, 20,000, under, push it aside. So it gives a little life to your offer. It breathes a little bit of life into it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And like Rhonda said, it's going to show your work ethic. It's going to show your communication style. But the one thing that you absolutely need to be aware of, just like you would with any prospect you're reaching out to on the sales side, is there is a line between communicating very efficiently and either over communicating or pissing people off. So if there are 20 offers, I'm not calling the listing agent every hour on the hour, but I am calling them in the beginning. And I can ask when do you believe that you guys will have a decision made by? And if they say we should have a decision by 6 o'clock tonight, well, then I can check in. I can send a text. Hey, how did everything go with your seller? Is there anything I can do here? What can we do to make this happen? But I'm not calling at 3 o'clock and saying, hey, did you speak to your seller? Because that agent just told me they're talking to them at 5 or 6 o'clock. And then I'm not calling them at 6:02 and saying, all right, are we getting this together? I'll make sure that if I haven't heard by, 7:30, 8 o'clock, check in with them again in the morning, see if there's anything I can do, but I'm not calling them so often that I'm pissing them off. That's the big thing, just like we would with a for sale by owner, an expired listing, a Facebook lead, our sister-in-law, it doesn't matter who it is. We need to make sure that there is some line and that we're not crossing the line of diminishing returns.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also make sure when you are speaking to the other side, to the listing agent or the buyer's agent too, that you're not sharing too much information about your client. Make sure that everything that you are saying and everything that you are sharing, that you are still, maintaining your fiduciary responsibility to your client. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in trying to negotiate that all of a sudden the agents are negotiating together without the permission of their clients. So you have to just also make sure that you're not giving away too much information, and that you're always saying, oh, you know what, maybe, and sometimes in a negotiation, you might say, listen, I might say, and usually I'll have this talk with my buyer first and say, okay, you know what, we're $10,000 apart. How would you feel if I can get us, are you willing to meet in the middle? And that is a great negotiation tactic, I feel like, and I use it a lot, that at some point, if the sides are kind of chipping away at finding common ground, at some point, you're going to probably ask if somebody wants to meet in the middle somewhere, right? Whether it's, and I know Sam just put this slide up, whether it's on a closing date, whether it's on price, whether it's on, it can be on anything, right? But just finding common ground. I will first say to the buyer and say, listen, if the seller agrees to come down 5,000 and will you agree to come up 5,000? Yeah, okay, maybe. I will then go to the listing agent and say, listen, my buyer is pretty much at the end of where they want to be. However, I know that we are 10,000 away or we're 5,000 away. Do you think there's a chance that your seller would meet us in the middle? And they might say, well, I'm certainly happy to ask. I can absolutely ask them if they would be willing to, to do that. Now, again, they're not going to say, oh yeah, no, they definitely will do that, because they can't negotiate without their seller's permission. But a response would be, you know what, I'm happy to have that conversation with them and say, okay, great. If you think you can maybe get them to come down to the middle, I will go back to my buyer and I will actually talk to them about coming back up in the middle, right? And so you're already kind of negotiating. You've already talked to your buyer a little bit. They're saying, okay, let's see if I can make this work. However, they're not giving that permission away without going and talking to their seller. So like, that's an example where as agents, you're going to work together to try to find solutions. As we said earlier, you have to be a problem solver, and you always have to be thinking of ways to kind of draw the line in. Yeah, always just make sure when you are communicating that you're not answering for your client, that you're always involving them in the process, so they feel like they're the ones being, they're included in the decision, and you're just not out there making the deal for them without their knowledge or their permission. All right. Any comments on that? Okay, so let's talk about this slide here. This is just ask what and how questions. This is just an example. So for the buyer, they want to close in 60 days. The seller, they want to close in 30 days. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you're requesting a 30-day closing. What is important to you about closing in 30 days? Right, and so now at this point, your seller might become, the client, he might become a little defensive and say, because that's what I want. I want a 30-day closing. Like, I don't know why you're asking me that, right? And the purpose is always just communicating and just saying, well, because if I can then go to the buyer and I can explain to them why that is so important to you, it might help them come to see, and it might help them come to terms with and agree to that closing. So it's always just about communicating. Any negotiation should be a fluid conversation, and it's about finding out facts, asking questions, and then trying to it's a meeting of the minds and just trying to get everybody to the same table. And sometimes you can't, there's going to be times where both sides just are not going to come together, and that's okay. Then in that case, that wasn't the house for them, or that just wasn't the right offer that they were willing to accept. By asking questions, you're going to find that out. You're going to find out where that line is. And sometimes it's not going to work. Yeah, in many instances, you are going to be able to figure that out, and you're going to be able to kind of, just kind of work it out with them where everybody can walk away.
So other things to keep in mind here is obviously part of these questions, that these what and how questions are so we can communicate things to the other side. However, it's also important to have an understanding of it so we can better communicate things to our side as well. So if our client, let's say the seller wants to close in 30 days because after day 30, they are going on vacation for 5 days. So they won't be able to close that next week. Well, it might not be the end of the world for us to then close in 40 days when they get back from vacation and give them time to settle back in. They won't feel stressed that they have to get everything done right before they go away. We can get the final readings, the smoke inspection, maybe we can have a mover go and clean some things up for them while they're away. What is important about those 30 days? Because now we find out it actually might just be that days 29 through 35 or 31 through 35 wouldn't have been able to happen. That doesn't mean that day 40 then can't happen. unless there's something really important of why it has to happen within 40 days or within 30 days and can't be further out than that. But that will allow us to better advise our own clients and to problem solve and to just, you know, move around situations that may in their mind seem like a huge obstacle. But because we're going on through this on a daily basis, and even if you yourself aren't actively working on clients every single day or aren't full-time, you have other people in your market center that are going through this on a daily basis that are an extension of you, and you're an extension of their experience that you'll be able to then help position your client. The other thing about what Rhonda said with that, you know, not every deal is going to get together. You have to be accepting of that and ready for it. And that's why we have to stay very level at all times. What we are looking to do, I feel very strongly that I just want to provide the best experience for my clients. And even if that doesn't lead to a direct paycheck, a direct commission in the next 90 days working with that client, that's okay, because I know it's going to lead to many future commissions and much further growth for my business through their referrals and their business with me in the future. If they have a horrible experience and they close, I'm never getting any other
You can hear that.
They have an incredible experience and they never close, then I have an opportunity to get referrals multiple times a year, every single year, for the entirety of me being in the business. So it can be very frustrating in the moment when that happens, but just know that everything you're doing today is building your life for the future. And you know, there will be some commission checks that do happen. There will be some that don't, but even the ones that don't, there's plenty of opportunity there that you're capitalizing on just from providing a really good service and advising your clients to the highest degree possible.
Do you mind if I just ask you a quick, from your personal perspective or
Absolutely.
experience? When you say commissions that don't happen, how many times has that happened in your career of real estate?
I had a seller 2 months ago. I was very confident because of the market that if there was ever a time to get this high price that he was looking for, it would be right now. He wanted to list it at 640. The property I think we all knew was probably closer to being worth 600. But his personality and his wife, like the family overall, they were very good people. They were, you know, decent price points. They seemed fairly reasonable, although they had higher expectations on the price. They were very reasonable people, someone that I believed I could build a very strong relationship with over time. And I'd rather have your referrals than your business. So I'm all about the relationship, not about that one transaction. Now, having said that, because of the market conditions, I took a 90-day listing, or I'm sorry, a 60-day listing agreement. And I never go below 6 months on my listings, but I took 60 days for this one because of the opportunity it can afford me in the future. It expired the weekend before Easter. So it expired, I think, on Saturday, and Easter was Sunday. We had a showing on Saturday. We actually had, I think, 3 showings on Saturday. Monday morning, we had a full asking price offer from one buyer and like about a $600,000 offer from the other buyer. So again, asking price was 640. That client decided over Easter Sunday, when he was with his family, that they were not going to sell, even if they got their asking price. I did not get the commission, but I absolutely have the relationship for the future. So I did everything I could do there, provided a great service, got him the price that he was looking for in the time frame, the short time frame that he was giving me the opportunity for. And it did not lead to a closing. And, you know, 640,000 on a 6% commission, that's a pretty good commission check. So losing out on that, you have pain, or you could experience some pain in the moment, but I recognize all of the opportunity that is there for the future. And that if I consistently do that, not just for him, but for everybody else, that it's going to lead to commission checks coming in so much more frequently than it doesn't. If I had the same scenario happen 10 times, there's probably a closing happening in at least 7 or 8 of them. This just happened to be one of the 2 or 3 that it won't end up happening from. But again, there's so much more that can happen beyond that. So, you know, I choose not to focus on that $18,000, $20,000 that could have came in, and focus more on the $200,000 or so that can come from that relationship over the course of the next 20 years.
But that does get discouraging, right?
It's absolutely discouraging if you choose to focus on it.
Okay.
I choose not to focus on the 20,000. Obviously, I look at my bank account. I'd feel great if I had another 20,000.
Yeah, me too.
But I know that's not the goal. My goal is not to have $20,000 tomorrow. My goal is to have the life and business that I'm looking for long term. So I have to choose what I want to focus on there, and all of you have to choose what you want to focus on. I choose to come from to focus on the abundance mindset. I choose to focus on the long-term relationship and business that I'm looking to grow for myself and my clients. If I choose to focus on that 20,000, I'm going to be down for weeks on end. And that is going to drain me of energy and emotion that I could have made not just that 20,000 in those next couple of weeks, but made much, much more beyond that by having more, again, the more of the abundance and being very, just positive overall and choosing not to focus on that 20 grand. It just can lead to a lot more by not focusing on it, at least from my perspective.
I love that, Sam. That right there.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, that was amazing, Sam. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to just interrupt for one moment because I actually have to jump off because we have an ALC meeting here this morning that I'm hosting. So I'm going to leave you guys in Sam's hands for the rest of today. And Sam, thank you so much for being for teaching with me today. Enjoyed that. And it was nice to see all of you guys. I hope you guys are enjoying this session. If you need anything, I'm going to pop my contact information into the chat right now before I jump off. And if you need anything at all, I am the team leader here at Keller Williams Coastal. I'm happy to help in any way with anything that you need for your business. So thanks again for letting me be the instructor today.
Thank you for educating us.
Thank you.
Rhonda.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Your class.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Welcome.
All right, so next thing to go over is just continuing with this positioning part. And I do want to give you all fair warning. This is my first time fully leading Ignite on my own, so just bear with me a little bit here. But with positioning, we probably will skip over this page 12 activity just because we only have about another hour or so left, and I want to make sure we get through all the material. But last thing that I really want to bring up with positioning is that sometimes you might be prepping the other side, or at least you have the opportunity to prep the other agent